engineering for your privacy program. And I'm apparently missing my presenter notes. Here we go. So a little bit about me. I am a former privacy practitioner. I've been 4 years in the privacy engineering space. I don't do that anymore. These days, I'm more DevSecOps and management work. However, if you want to follow me on the socials are right there. If you want to talk about it, et cetera, here's my Twitter and Mastodon information. I realize this is not quite immediately after lunch, but sort of after lunch, and you're all getting settled in. And I can tell this is the perfect time to get really comfortable in those chairs and consider dozing off. So I will do my best to expedite that dozing off by talking about the wonderful, boring field of privacy compliance. So let's talk about what privacy means. It's 2023. Privacy can mean a bunch of different things. So I want to really be clear about what I mean by privacy over the course of this presentation. So privacy can mean any one of these things. You can talk about personal privacy. You can talk about privacy enhancing technologies. You can talk about trust and safety. I'm not talking about any of those things. I'm talking about privacy regulations, aka boring privacy, aka privacy compliance. So here's a word cloud. Wait a minute. There is the word law in there. I should note that I am not a lawyer, nor do I have any affiliation or credentials whatsoever with the legal profession. So please do not take this presentation as legal advice. Thank you. Let's move on. So why do we care about regulatory privacy? Let's go back in time and look. So when I was doing the first draft of these slides, I tried covering the history of computers and data, and that alone took 25 minutes, which I do not have here today. So I'm going to go through this history and timeline very fast. There will be a quiz at the end. Are you all ready? So first, computers, we made rocks think. Networking, on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. Moore's law, here are some average sizes of hard disks over time. Search, here's one cloud. Here are more clouds. Let's zoom in and enhance. Here's the socials, big data, deep learning, generative AI. Phew, that was a lot. All right, real talk. So, we have to ask ourselves in this day with so much data, like all over the place, so much data storage. You've all got personal data devices in your pockets, possibly looking at them right now and not paying attention to me. So we really have to ask ourselves, are we good with handling all of this data in 2023? Let's take a look. Not one, but 2 data breaches with Marriott. And this is, I think, the creme de la creme, trying to be like, hey, here's some location data to give to our researchers. Actually, it turns out you can find all the secret US Army bases through that. So are we good with the data? No. All right, so clearly some regulations and laws need to come into place to get this under control. So let's talk about them. Again, reminder, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. So in 1995, the EU enacted Directive 95/46/EC, otherwise known as the Data Protection Directive, to regulate the processing and movement of personal data within the EU. As part of that, they came up with basically 7 different principles: notice, purpose, consent, security, disclosure, access, accountability. So notice is, okay, you have to give notice that your data is being collected. Purpose is you got to make sure that the data is collected for a particular purpose and not any other purpose. So if you're going to collect data for marketing only, you can only use it for marketing. You cannot use it for, I don't know, like seeing if it's the same person over multiple things. The data should not be disclosed or sent to other places without the data subject's consent. The data obviously should be secured. You want to have security for your data. You want to make sure, as part of disclosure, that the data subjects are informed as to who is collecting that data. And then access, data subjects should be able to request their data and request their whatever information the company has on them at any given point, and be able to make corrections should the company have accidentally made mistakes on that data. And then accountability, we want to be able to fine you if like you get all of previous 6 things wrong. So it's basically holding those data collectors accountable for those principles. So that was in 1995. In the year 2000, Canada was like, hey, we want to work more with the EU. Like, we're getting into this data-driven world. Let's introduce PIPEDA, which stands for Personal Information Protection and Electronics Documents Act. Now that's a mouthful. I like PIPEDA much better than whatever that long thing was. So it came into effect in 2000, as I mentioned, to assure the EU that we have our shit together. Of course, not to be outdone by the EU, Canada added 3 more principles for a total of 10. So we're in this, so in Canada now has PIPEDA and it's still present today with these 10 different principles. Again, very similar. I don't think I need to go through this in any more detail. Well, since 2000, the year 2000, we mostly ignored the US with regards to data regulations. So Canada had its own thing, the EU had its own thing. The US was like, whatever, until 2013 happened. And then we learned as part of the Snowden leaks that in fact, SSL was added and removed here in between data centers. Now, the problem with that is that for a lot of EU people, they were using a lot of US companies' products. So they were using Google, they were using Facebook, they were using Twitter, et cetera, and because those companies were based in the US, like, okay, the data is obviously resident there, and they figured the US has smart people, right? The US knows how to secure things. They have lots of money. Clearly, they are doing the right thing. Well, clearly, they were not. So that was in 2013, where we discovered that the transit links between Google data centers, whether within the US or across the world, were not actually encrypted at all. And different nation state actors could actually go and take a look at it. We also had in 2014, Facebook and the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where we discovered that we'd have data collected for one thing and start being used for another thing. So these kinds of events since the year 2000 then basically created a whole kind of existential crisis for the world around data and protection of like, should we really do something about that? So in 2018, the EU introduced GDPR. GDPR stands for the General Data Protection Regulation. You might wonder, how is this any different from the thing they had before? So the main thing they provided with GDPR was more clarity as to those original 7 principles. So lawful, fair, so you'll see there's a lot of similarities. You want lawful, fair, transparent use. You want limited purpose. You want to minimize collection. So not just getting consent from the user of, okay, I'm going to collect your data, but you want to minimize the collection to begin with. You want to ensure high accuracy. You want to define retention for your data. Of course, the security bit is important. Please put safeguards on your data. And of course, the accountability still matters. You have like, we want to fine you if you get things wrong. And in this case, they put much bigger teeth on GDPR with regards to the accountability. I think one of the stats was like basically 4%, I think, of your I can't remember if it's net profit or net revenue. It's been some time since I've been in this field, but it was significant enough that as soon as this law dropped, a wonderful guy named Max Schrems started suing a bunch of different US companies for getting this wrong. Since then, privacy regulations have in fact exploded all over the world. There's at least 120 countries today that have enacted some sort of privacy law, either like it's in effect or they're starting to, or they're thinking about it. So the landscape at this point has completely changed. And this includes in the United States, where in California we have a CCPA, now CPRA, which it turns out is very closely modeled after GDPR. So even the US is following suit. So this is a world that is not going away. We come to the actual point of the presentation, which is in this world of data, in this world of privacy regulations, how do we set ourselves up for success with regards to privacy compliance? Well, do you want to build a privacy program? So what do we need to do for a privacy program? We need to define so if we think about a lot of you are security practitioners, you may have heard of security programs. You have a vulnerability management program, you have like a PCI SOX compliance program, et cetera, et cetera. For any program to actually work and be successful, you need to define success criteria. That is the same for privacy programs as well. So let's take our GDPR principles from before, and let's transform to some success criteria. And so based on these success criteria, we can then transform them into actual processes. So for our success criteria, we want to say, I am able to quantify data risk. I am processing the data subject requests on a timely basis, and on a data comprehensive basis. And I am able to show that I have effective data protections, data consent tracking, and data notification mechanisms. So let's transform them to processes. What does this look like? These are the common processes that are in place for mature privacy programs today at various companies. So DPI is a data privacy impact assessment. DSR is a data subject request. So you want So in a data privacy impact assessment, basically, this is a data inventory. I think you've seen this before in some of your security programs. We've just gotten a little bit more intense with them. With data subject requests, these are these kinds of features. So if you log into Twitter, or I guess it's now called X, and you go into one of the settings, the top one is the export or access request, and the bottom one is the deletion or right to be forgotten request. And then you want your data policy. I think, let me go back. For a data policy, that's like a data classification policy. You want to know what are the different levels of data that you have, what sort of security or privacy protections you want to be in place for that kind of data. So say aggregate data is okay, maybe PII is not, and then credit card data is definitely like you need really secure protections for that. So that's where your data policy comes useful. You want to really clearly define a data consent lifecycle. What is the consent lifecycle, or what does consent mean? You may be familiar with this, specifically this cookie banner. This is one of the consent mechanisms, data consent mechanisms that is quite common today. Does it work well? We're not quite sure, but it seems to be annoying a lot of people, so we're doing maybe something right. And then privacy policy, this is something you've seen before. This is on every single page, is right next to the terms of service. It tells like just broadly across all the customers, this is how the company might be using your data and how it could be handling it or transferring it to different people. As a very simplified view, there's obviously lots of nuance and more detail there, which I'm happy to talk about like after the talk, but let's move on. So this is the big picture of how those different success criteria map to the processes. Let's talk about the people. So in an effective program, you need 4 groups of people involved. You need your lawyers, because they need to know the law, because I'm not a lawyer. You need your program managers to kind of oversee the whole cycle. You need your product managers who understand what the product is that you're building. And of course, you have the devs, because they're the code monkeys and they write the code and they ship it. Let's see how this plays into a common software development lifecycle. So I have an extremely simple software development lifecycle. So we have plan, build, test, launch, and then we iterate. For those of you who like the agile methodologies, we go back and we do it again. Let's add the privacy processes to the mix. So we've got all those little components I had before. Here they are. And here's where they live now. Let's talk about this a little bit more. So data policy and privacy policy. Your lawyer helps define these. Data policy is used internally. Privacy policy is what's shown externally. Your product manager defines what helps identify as part of your privacy program, what data may be added, changed, removed as part of this process, and fills out the DPIA. And then as you go into moving into the development cycle, your program manager ensures that we're integrating the product to various DSR or consent life cycles, so that you've got you're able to actually fulfill the rights needed for your customers. This is quite often a ticketing system. So, and then after that we have testing and launch. So let's go back to the other processes. So we've solved our compliance problem, right? We've added the DPIA, we've added a ticketing system. What can go wrong? So let's take a look at this DPIA again. Hooray, we have solved the problem. So when you've got like tens or hundreds of teams or hundreds or thousands of services, you're now creating an exponential amount of paperwork for your different teams. Some of you who have been in security programs before, especially compliance programs, know that you are probably the least liked person at your company, because you're showing up and you're like, hey, I need you to check off these things for this SOC 2 Type 2 assessment or this PCI assessment. And they're like, why are you interfering with our product timelines this week? So now we've just made this a lot worse, having all the product teams screaming in frustration at this unnecessary slowdown. And so what's going to happen is you're going to have people cutting corners because they're being told to ship fast. So they're not going to fill these out right. They're not going to do due diligence on like the things that are coming in through the help desk. So what can we do here? So let's go in and dig into this DPIA problem and try and see if we can solve it better. So instead of having humans do this, what if we had computers auto-generate this? Is this possible? Well, it turns out it is. For example, Google offers a DLP product that can do this for your BigQuery data. It can take a look at the data, auto-tag it, auto-classify it. and then if you enable that, so it's not perfect. So you do have to do a little bit of like double checking to make sure all the data is correct. But if you do move that, now you're freeing a lot of people from having to fill out those DPIAs all the time. And now you can move into like an exciting new role with that information, with that automation, where you can explore new kinds of controls for your data. So I think we're all aware that you can have controls that are on the table-based or database-based. But instead, what if we thought about columnar-based access control, which is what is shown here. That's a feature that Google offers today, where you can restrict access to, instead of just to the table, to specific columns of data, which might be really useful for your data analysts who are dealing with a really big, like BigQuery table, and they only need to see like 3 fields, right? So now you've got like your lawyer happy, your product manager happy, and your program manager is happy because like the data is probably a lot better than what it was with people cutting corners. You can put better access controls. This is a neat new world we're in. So let's move on and look at this like ticketing problem with DSRs. So I think we all know help desks are terrible. Let's take a look at what an actual flow might look like for the DSR process. So customer writes in, hello, I would like my data, please. So it goes into the portal, which goes and ties into your ticketing system. The ticketing system sends you an email being like, thank you for filing ticket 1234. We will get to it right immediately. That ticket 1234 is then assigned to some dev who's like, I guess I will do this as part of my on-call. They kick off an export job on their service. The job then completes and sends the data to the dev. Why the dev gets access to this data, who knows? The dev then takes that data and puts it on the ticket, which then gets sent back to the customer. There's a lot of inefficiency here. What's this whole thing doing here? We've added a couple humans in the loop. So if things go wrong, this is what happens when things go wrong, because you've added too many people and processes on the loop. So what can we do to remove humans from the loop? We add automation. We connect the requests coming in from the outside straight to the services. Why do we have a help desk? Why do we have devs? Why do we have all this ticket creation, monitoring, and assignment? So let's get rid of it. It's much simpler. This is your process. And of course, to make this happen, you need people to write code for it. You need devs to write code for it. So overall, this is what I haven't talked about consent. Consent is a whole other thing. I couldn't fit it into the talk. But overall, this is roughly what the whole process might look like for your privacy program when you're adding a lot more automation into it. And in fact, this is what I did as part of the privacy engineering team. We started off with forms and ticketing, basically to just get our nascent privacy program off the ground. And then we engineered services and components over time to automate parts of that away as much as possible, so that, faster loops, less humans, less options for mistakes, probably higher quality data. So we need a specialized group of people for it. We need an engineering team. So how do you hire? Well, it turns out it's no different from your typical security software dev. Now, note this is a lot more infrastructure. You want to optimize for infrastructure, backend, integration, development type skills. You also probably want some sort of privacy and security knowledge for general sanity checks. So it's really no different from any other kind of security-based dev job or security infrastructure-based dev job, although maybe integrating with a lot more people than usual. As such, like the missions and vision statements for privacy engineering teams are going to be sort of similar in the same way. It's like you're building infrastructure to help the devs' lives, to help them move faster, to help the product teams move faster while ensuring compliance, et cetera, et cetera. All right, quiz time. I told you there was going to be a quiz at the end. No, I'm kidding. So let's recap. So privacy compliance is a necessity in 2023. I talked a little bit about some of the major privacy regulations out there today, the Data Protection Directive, PIPEDA, GDPR, very briefly about CCPA. I talked about what you need to do to put together a privacy program, the success criteria, the players and the processes as part of this. I talked about how the program plus the SDLC, really the answer is to automate, automate, automate. Developers. And we come to the main point of my presentation, which is you need a privacy engineering team so that you can do effective privacy engineering for your privacy program. Thanks everyone for listening. Again, Socials are at the bottom. Happy now to take questions from the audience. Yes. So the question was about incidents and considering I mentioned about breaches and incidents at the start and whether there were any efficiencies that were gotten by introducing these processes. The main efficiency you introduce is you have a better understanding of like, okay, what data was involved as part of the breach. You don't have to spend so much time trying to be like, okay, what was the service that was impacted? Well, I guess you still have to figure out what services were impacted, but it's like what data was in the service, who put it there, why was the data there, where did it come from, who is it impacting? Is it like a wide amount of people or a small amount of people? Is it a critical product? Is it not a critical product? So like you answer those kinds of questions much faster with things like a DPIA. And ideally, you have better like notification mechanisms in place as a result as well, so that you can notify all the affected customers very quickly and very fast. GDPR, I think, requires a 72-hour breach notification, which is very fast. And if you're a very big company with a lot of paperwork, then that's quite a short time to try and get all that information together to give good, timely information to your customers. Yes.
The application shouldn't even have existed when you're doing DPIA, because you're really looking at it from that perspective, or what in your system and doing that DPIA at a conceptual level versus what you conduct. How would you be able to in a typical management for yourself?
Okay, so the question is, the examples I had on DPIA were more on existing systems as opposed to new systems. I think it's sort of really dependent on how your engineering culture is structured. For net new, you probably with your product manager, you have a product requirements doc. Has that initial, like, this is probably the types of data we can gather. And you might actually do like a prelim DPIA at the start and then do a more comprehensive DPIA right before launch, because in between when you're designing and then to when you launch, the requirements as the devs figure out what's possible, what's not possible, and what data they can bring in and what data they cannot, like those requirements are going to change. So you might move the DPIA to like later in the process. But either way, the DPIA is put where it is in the planning stage, because you want to make sure you're continually like double checking as the product and the services change over time that you've got the correct information always on file. Correct. Correct. Yes.
You describe yourself really great from a program standpoint, but I've seen way too many companies use entire privacy programs, one overworked person.
So the question was, this is very indicative of a very mature privacy program where you have resources in the right place, and very often privacy programs at many companies is one overworked legal person. I am sorry if you are that legal person at your company. The main thing is, so there's a I think we all know that security is often characterized as a pure cost center. Privacy is equally the same. So it's sometimes very, very hard to advocate appropriately for those resources. And I totally understand that. The things that you can try and pull in your back pocket is you can try and show the threat of like, this is gonna impact like fine-wise. We're the same size as these other companies. We really need more people. You can try and quantify the amount of work and the amount of hours the legal person is doing, especially showing what they're paying attention to and also what they're not paying attention to as a result. Similarly, so when I started on a privacy engineering team, I was one of 2 engineers because they did not believe that you needed more than 2 engineers for a very mature, large finance fintech company that that was required. And we showed over time with as we set up the ticketing things and we set up notifying people that 2 people was simply not enough. Like we were overworked, we were chasing people, we needed to move to automation, we needed more people to move us to automation. We weren't able to start on any of the other privacy engineering projects we wanted to do, especially around cookie compliance and consent. And so that made it easier and easier to advocate over time. But you have to show, like, we're not getting all of these other requirements done because like we don't have the staffing and it's a lot of work. And here's how many hours we're doing. So here's what we're focused on. Here's what we're not focused on. If you end up trying to do everything at once, you're going to do it poorly and you're going to convince them that one overworked legal person is in fact all you need. So you need to be, you know, strategizing on what things you need to drop on the floor in order to say, we need help from elsewhere.
Yeah, one more question and we have a hand up. Oh, that's you in the gray shirt. Yep.
Okay, so the question is about you know, how are devs part of this? How do we bring devs as part of the privacy culture? There was nothing in the testing bit. I do agree with that. I will note that if you think having good security culture is hard to push through your organization, let me tell you about privacy culture. And this is why, again, moving to automation, I simplified a bunch of things here. As part of the automation process, we actually made it self-serve, so devs could integrate it themselves. They would understand, we wrote documentation, so they figured out how to get into those integration points. We actually provided automated tests for them to just basically, like, we treated ourselves as a, you know, if you have like security tooling as a service for your company, there's privacy tooling as a service for your company. And basically rely on the automation and automated tests and whatever to catch things and flag it, because not all you could push the culture, but it's going to be wildly inconsistent. And you want them to be able to raise the right flags at the right time, depending on the situation.
Great. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you.
And one of the best history of privacy on the internet presentations I've ever seen. So thank you very much.